Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Alberta Premier Daniel Smith now has a seat at the legislature after easily winning the by-election in Brooks Medicine Hat. We have reaction. The U.S. midterms are taking place, and there have been a few surprises. Political reporter Lisa Daftari has the details from Los Angeles. And we hear about a young Lethbridge man who's finding it difficult locating a kidney donor. BCN's Angela Stewart shares the struggles of Chris Pickering.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Alberta Premier Daniel Smith is heading back to the legislature. She's been absent from the ledge for the last 7 years. Daniel Smith won the by-election in Brooks Medicine Hat on Tuesday night, taking home around 54% of the vote. Her nearest competitor was the NDP's Gwendolyn Dirk, who garnered around 26% support. Smith says she and her team of MLAs have a good game plan moving forward as we head into next spring's provincial election.
We are going to deliver more and better jobs, accessible health care, and a lower cost of living for you and your family. That is the choice. That is the only choice. Well, the others only want to talk about the past with their gotcha politics. The UCP is always going to listen to you, the voters. And when it comes to your cost of living, let me just talk about a couple of things that are coming up. How much you pay for life's necessities. You need to decide who will actually fight for you. Because the NDP Liberal coalition sure does love their carbon tax, don't they? The carbon tax is designed by the wealthy and well-connected. They are not impacted by it. It's to make life more painful for the poor and the powerless. And with that tax set to go up yet again in the middle of winter at a time when inflation is eating into more and more of your hard-earned dollars, I am listening and I'm going to be for you, there for you every single day.
Premier Smith says she's reconvening the legislature on November the 29th and is promising more help to Albertans who've been struggling with sharp hikes in both gas and electricity costs. The Alberta provincial election is not until next May, but according to political reporter Tyler Dawson, the UCP has to shore up a lot of support between now and then. The latest polls show the UCP is trailing the NDP in popular support, not just in Edmonton, but in Calgary as well.
The sort of received wisdom in political circles is that there are three constituencies in Alberta. There's Edmonton, there's Calgary, and there's the rest. And in order to form government, you need to win two of those. And at present, the New Democrats are up in two of those. So for the United Conservatives looking at that, they need to be asking themselves, what can they do to not widen that gap necessarily in rural and small town Alberta, but narrow that gap in Calgary and Edmonton. So those are some of the questions that I'm certain the people around Smith are spending a lot of time thinking about right now.
Tyler Dawson will also have more details of how the provincial and federal governments are investing hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars into a new hydrogen facility in Edmonton. That's coming up after Business News. The U.S. midterm elections are taking place. Now, when it comes to the Senate, it is an almost even split between the Republicans and the Democrats. The Republicans have 48 seats to the Democrats' 46. 51 is needed for a majority. U.S. political reporter Lisa Daftari joins me now from Los Angeles to talk about this in more detail. Lisa, were you a little surprised by the results, not just in the Senate, but in the House as well, where the Republicans also own a slim lead of 204 to 176 seats?
Very much. I mean, for 2 years now, we've been hearing how the midterms will be a red wave, a bloodbath, how we're going to definitely see some increased seats in the House of Representatives and perhaps a couple in the Senate as well. And obviously, it did not pan out as people had predicted. Very, very surprising, even in local races in places like Michigan. We saw everything go to blue. Many other swing states that we saw, we would think that there would be more local local races go to the Republicans, but it went to the Democrats. So extremely surprising because of the economy, because of inflation, because of where we are at, to see these kinds of results.
It looks like Florida Governor Ron DeSantis may appear to be the heir apparent to Donald Trump and lead the Republican Party. Would you say that's a safe bet?
It's interesting, you'll hear little huddles where people actually want Donald Trump to go away. They don't want to deal with Donald Trump because of the baggage that he carries. Even if they are supporters of Donald Trump, they feel as though because of the way that he has been smeared in the by the Democrat Party, by the media, that he will only ruin the chances of DeSantis or a Republican candidate getting to the White House in 2024. So for that reason, they were hoping that he wouldn't even tease the announcement. But not only did Donald Trump tease the announcement that he will make an announcement on Tuesday, he also came out and said DeSantis better not run in 2024 because I know a lot of secrets about him that only his wife would perhaps know. It weakens the party. It weakens the confidence that the American voter has, whether they're Republican or independent or Democrat. So the timing of all these announcements really not so good for the Republican Party. And whether he's the heir or whether he's going to go away and DeSantis will carry this. What happened in Florida is extremely indicative. Now, if you go back to 2018, DeSantis won by about a margin of 30,000 votes, and now he won by million votes or approximately around that. So I know that it was a huge exponential jump in the number of votes that he got. Perhaps many people are saying it's indicative of how Floridians are very happy with the way that he handled not only COVID, but post-COVID, how he has taken a very strong position on immigration, on COVID policies, on keeping schools open, and not being bashful about a lot of those policies to make Florida stronger and better. So across the board in Florida, we saw red victories. A lot of people are wondering if the nation will go that way in 2024, if it didn't go that way for the midterms.
Thanks so much, Lisa. That was U.S. political reporter Lisa Daftari joining us from the Foreign Desk in Los Angeles. Well, it was a bitterly cold day across much of southwestern Alberta today, but we need to keep our chins up since a warming trend is on the way. Jeanette Rocher is in now with an early peek at the forecast. Jeanette, we could go from below minus 25 to above zero fairly soon.
Yes, very soon, Hal. By Friday, we're looking at a high of 2 degrees, and by next week, we could even be seeing a high of 10. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's look at tonight and tomorrow because it's a completely different story. Into this evening, we're looking at an overnight low of minus 20. With that wind chill, it's going to feel like minus 27. Into tomorrow, Thursday, we're looking at sunny skies with a high of minus 10. But with that wind chill, again, we're going to be feeling it more like between minus 15 and minus 27. Not exactly balmy weather, but I will be back later in the show to let you know about that warming trend coming at us very shortly.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. The public inquiry into Ottawa's use of the Emergencies Act took a long break earlier today following a medical incident in the hearing room. A lawyer representing the Public Order Emergency Commission collapsed while he was questioning the second witness of the day. Gabriel Poliquin was in the early stages of examining Ontario's Deputy Solicitor General when he collapsed to the floor. His condition is unclear at this point, and the public hearing was able to continue with more witnesses testifying. Marco Van Hugenbos is a Fort Macleod Town Councillor. He's also someone who was charged with mischief at the Coutts border blockade last winter. He recently offered up his testimony at the public inquiry into the Emergencies Act in Ottawa. Van Hugenbos says the Emergencies Act never should have been invoked.
More and more I've come to the conclusion that it was not necessary and that the EMA was a political tool. It was never, there was nothing that was used that the EMA had the ability to use to resolve Coutts. Yesterday, my testimony yesterday spoke to our decision making in regards to leaving Coutts, and the EMA and the powers and all of the abilities given to law enforcement under the EMA never became relevant for us. That was never considered for us in leaving Coutts.
Fort Macleod Town Councillor Marco Van Hugenbos will have more details for us on BCN's Weekend Show coming up this weekend. Federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre spoke about his past support for the Freedom Convoy, which took place last winter in our nation's capital. Poilievre was asked about his support for the truckers as the public inquiry into the Emergencies Act continues. Now, at a supermarket in Vancouver, he told reporters that his position has not changed.
I support those peaceful and law-abiding protesters who demonstrated for their lives and livelihoods and liberties, while condemning any individual who broke laws, behaved badly, or blockaded critical infrastructure. I think it's possible to support the overall cause of personal free choice in vaccination and the overall cause of respecting the truckers' ability to earn an income, while holding individually responsible anyone who behaved badly, broke laws, or blockaded key infrastructure. That was my position before, during, and now.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau criticized New Brunswick's Premier Blaine Higgs for naming a minister known for his past opposition to bilingualism on a committee to review the province's Official Languages Act. Trudeau made the comments at the 5th Canadian Division Support Base, Gagetown, to mark Veterans Week.
I think it's pretty basic that we need to protect official languages and ensure that we're protecting official language minorities across the country. That's something that this government has always done, and it's something we're going to continue to do. The work we're doing across the country matters to millions of Canadians who are proud that we have 2 official languages in this country. And nowhere is that clearer than right here in New Brunswick, our only officially bilingual province. So yes, it's good to hear a range of perspectives from people who want to protect bilingualism in this province, who want to protect French in this province. But you don't put someone who has spent his entire career attacking official bilingualism and questioning the need to protect French in New Brunswick or elsewhere on a panel designed to protect bilingualism in New Brunswick. It doesn't make any sense.
The federal government has withdrawn a joint communique on health funding with provincial and territorial ministers. This ends 2 days of widely anticipated meetings in Vancouver without an agreement.
The federal government expressed its disappointment, I suppose, Minister Duclos and others, with the decision of the premiers to reiterate their important position on the Canada Health Transfer. And the federal government chose to withdraw participation from both the communique and from a joint press conference. I want to say that I find that disappointing. There is work to be done, both on the Canada Health Transfer and a lot of other things.
Unfortunately, despite yesterday's gesture of good faith, provincial and territorial colleagues, our colleagues, have received marching orders by their premiers not to make further progress. Once again, I will be very clear. Before we start talking about the means, we need to talk about the ends. And that can only happen and continue to happen at the health minister's table, and premiers need to let that happen.
A young Lethbridge man says he needs a kidney donation after learning his own kidneys are failing. Chris Pickering was diagnosed with kidney disease 4 years ago. He fears he could be living a life on dialysis if he doesn't find a match. BCN's Angela Stewart has more from Chris, who says this is his 3rd time trying to find a match.
I'm not the same person I used to be.
He's either helping out his brother in Calgary with work, going on small walks, or hanging out at home. Chris Pickering is doing everything he can to just pass the time. But what he needs most right now is a new kidney.
For the last 6 months, I've been around 5 to 8% kidney function.
In 2018, Pickering was diagnosed with IgA vasculitis, a disease that causes blood vessel swelling and can affect a person's skin as well as their kidneys.
There wasn't really anything wrong with my kidneys when I first got diagnosed, but after years and years of white blood cells flooding into the kidneys, after a long time it plugs the filters up.
Now at 27 years old, Pickering's kidneys are close to failing, and he's in need of a donor.
The more people we can get involved and put on the list, the better chances the doctors have to find a direct match.
Currently in Alberta at the moment, according to the Canadian Institute of Health Information, there's approximately 300 people waiting for a kidney transplant.
Pickering says people have reached out but have struggled to find a match. A program through the Kidney Foundation of Canada, patients now have the ability to find donors from across the country.
The Living Organ Donor Expense Reimbursement Program, where we reimburse quite a lot of those costs, airfare, accommodation, meals, even for a companion, to make it easier for patients who are looking for a donor.
His biggest fear is living a life on dialysis.
It's definitely getting to the time where I won't be able to push it off any longer. Having to rely on someone else and rely on a machine to live is, in my mind, quite dangerous, quite scary.
And it's something he hopes he can avoid, but for now, it's a waiting game for that perfect match. For Bridge City News, I'm Angela Stewart.
And praying Chris finds a donor real soon. A special dignitary from Lethbridge received a top honor recently. Lethbridge County Reeve Tori Campbell took home the Queen Elizabeth the second Platinum Jubilee Medal on Monday at the Rural Municipalities of Alberta Convention in Edmonton. The award is given to citizens of the United Kingdom and its Commonwealth countries who've made a significant impact in their communities and who have contributed to the betterment of their municipalities. Campbell says it was quite humbling to receive the award.
Very fortunate, very thankful for that honor, but also acknowledge that, there were 7,000 of them that went out in Alberta to deserving Albertans that have contributed to society and helped to make Alberta a better place. So very fortunate to be included in that list, very thankful, but also acknowledge all the great work of so many Albertans that were recognized. And obviously, you can't recognize everyone at the same time too, but a big honor and very thankful.
Campbell began his second term as REE for Lethbridge County and has been a member of council since 2017. A healthy donation has made its way to our 2 food banks here in Lethbridge. A total of over $10,000 was raised and given to officials at the Lethbridge and Interfaith Food Banks by the staff from the Lethbridge Curling Club. As BCN's Micah Quinn explains now, representatives from the Lethbridge Food Bank say this money will go directly to helping families who have the greatest need here in our city.
Last month alone, we saw over 90 families that were accessing the hamper program more than last year.
The Lethbridge Food Bank has seen a large increase in clients over the last few months, and Mac Nickel, the executive director of the nonprofit, says this donation is much needed, especially with inflation and the cost of living continuing to rise.
One way I like to really point it out is we really started to see food inflation prices happen around March was when we really started to see it, and directly we saw clients come in more.
The money will go directly toward funding Christmas hampers at the Lethbridge Food Bank.
We include things like stuffing and large dinner meal planning, turkeys, bigger meat planning, to make sure that the families that are accessing the program during Christmas time have exactly what they need for their families.
The donation for the 2 food banks comes from the 50-50 raffle that the Lethbridge Curling Club provided during the 2022 Tim Hortons Brier. The general manager of the Lethbridge Curling Club, Kirk Mearns, says raising money for the community is one of the most important things the organization does.
We want to make sure that when we raise money that everybody wins, that we help give everybody a helping hand where we can and when we can. We work it in our Special Olympics, we work it with our junior curling programs, with our high school programs. We really want to make sure that we're giving back to the community as much as we can.
Staff from the Lethbridge Curling Club also cited the 2022 Tim Hortons Brier, which generated over $16.8 million in economic activity for the Lethbridge region, as a huge factor for the continued popularity of curling in our city. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Well, as you saw with Micah there just behind him, we've had a lot of snow here in the city, and there's been a lot of the white stuff in the mountains as well. Ski season is officially underway at some resorts in the province, including Sunshine Village in Banff. The resort recently had its earliest opening in 40 years on November the 3rd. An official at the ski resort says conditions on the hills are incredible for those heading out to the slopes.
We got hit with a storm around October 21st, and that snow has just proven to be snowmageddon. It's coming thick, wet, deep, and delicious. So to date, we've had over 126 centimeters land on our slopes, and our base is well over 86 centimeters presently, and we're currently working hard to open more terrain. We do currently have our Strawberry Express, Wolverine Express, Wawa Quad, and Jackrabbit Quad open to the public, and we're working hard to get as much of the mountain open as we can.
And Sunshine Village is anticipating a 201-day ski season this year. Well, if you headed out to the mountain parks today, it would have been a good idea to bring along an extra sweater or a parka. But you know, it's not only cold in the Southern Rockies, but also here in Lethbridge. But a reprieve, however, is on the way. Full weather details are on deck. Well, it was another cold one across much of southwestern Alberta again today. Jeanette Rocher is in now with a full look at the weather picture. Jeanette, the good news is that the mercury will be climbing by quite a bit as we get closer to the weekend.
Indeed, it will, Hal, but we are still looking at very chilly conditions into this evening and tomorrow. Overnight low tonight, minus 20, looking at more like minus 27 with that wind chill into Thursday. Lots of sunshine, high of minus 10, but again, with that wind chill, going to be feeling so much chillier. High of 2 degrees. There's those plunge temperatures right there. On Friday with mainly sunny skies. Saturday, we're looking at increasing clouds. -2 for a high, -3 as a high on Sunday with mainly clear skies throughout the rest of the week. And then jumping up to the plus temperatures again for Monday and Tuesday. Look at those lovely temperatures. 5 for a high on Monday and an expected high of 10 degrees on Tuesday, bringing us back up to well above seasonal averages for this time of year. Average high for this time of year, 6 degrees. Average low, -6, so +6 as an average high, -6 as an average low. 18, that was our high on this day back in 1987. And -28, that was the chilliest on record for this day back in 1945. The sun rose this morning at 7:33 a.m. and this afternoon at 4:57 p.m. I hate to saying that with the days getting so much shorter, 9 hours and 24 minutes of daylight today. Victoria looking at a high of 6 degrees tomorrow with partly cloudy skies. 4 degrees the high in Vancouver. Now Vancouver seeing a 30% chance of flurries in the morning, 30% chance of showers in the afternoon. Lots of sunshine across the rest of Alberta tomorrow. -11 for a high in Edmonton and -7 the high in Calgary. And of course, both of those cities looking at wind chill factors, as well as Saskatoon, -19 the high, but it's going to feel more like in the -30s tomorrow with all of that wind chill. Regina sitting at -15 and -3 the high in Winnipeg with some periods of snow. As we look to the central part of the country, 16 as a high across this whole region here. Toronto sitting with clear skies, partly cloudy skies in Ottawa, and increasing clouds in Montreal, and of course a lovely 16-degree day now. Tropical storm Nicole is hitting the east coast later on, and that is going to move northerly and hitting Atlantic Canada by late Saturday, where it will be post-tropical storm Nicole. Until then, though, we're looking at tomorrow, showers in Fredericton, 13 the high, 15 the high in Halifax, high of 11 degrees in Charlottetown, and St. John sitting at showers tomorrow with a high of 5 degrees as well. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
Today's weather report is brought to you by Ridge Utilities, providing competitive rates for electricity, natural gas, and internet, while investing back in communities across southern Alberta.
Stock in the parent company of Facebook was up more than 7% today after it announced it was laying off around 13% of its workforce. CEO Mark Zuckerberg says the 11,000 layoffs are necessary at Meta Platforms as they contend with faltering revenue and broader tech industry woes. Zuckerberg said he anticipated rapid growth even after the pandemic, but it did not play out the way he had expected. He did not give specifics as to the number of Canadians who would be affected by the move. This comes a week after widespread layoffs at Twitter following the takeover by Elon Musk. Other tech companies, including Ottawa Spotify, have also slashed jobs after hiring rapidly during the pandemic. Twitter's new owner and Tesla CEO Elon Musk has sold close to $4 billion US worth of Tesla stock. The regulatory filings show that Musk sold 19.5 million shares of the electric car company from November 4th to November the 8th. Musk sold $7 billion of his Tesla stock in August as he worked to finance the $44 billion Twitter purchase he was trying to get out of at the time. Canada's Fraser Institute recently completed a study comparing government versus private sector jobs here in Alberta. The study found several interesting factors, including a 5.6% gap in pay in favor of public sector workers. Ben Eisen is a senior fellow with the Fraser Institute, and he says the study is really to help Alberta prepare for a future without oil and gas windfalls and revenues.
Right now, there's a resource windfall and the government's in surplus, that the long-term fiscal prospects for Alberta are very difficult. Without all this resource revenue, Alberta has a lot of trouble. And so if it dries up anytime soon or later, the province needs to be ready and needs to better align its spending with the amount it's taking in taxes. And it's taking in quite a lot of money in taxes. And right now, that is not happening. There is too much being spent relative to the amount that's collecting through the tax base. So we need to be looking for ways to deliver public services more cost effectively, and how we're compensating public servants and the rest of the government sector should be an important part of that conversation.
Make sure you catch the full interview with Ben Eisen from the Fraser Institute on the BCN Weekend Edition. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 316 points on the day to finish at 19,344. The Dow was down 646 points to 32,513. The S&P 500 was down 79 on the day to 3748. And the NASDAQ was down 263 points to 10,353. West Texas Intermediate oil was down $3.08 to $85.83 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 27 cents to $5.87 US. Gold was down 2 cents to $17.0672 US an ounce, and silver was up a cent to $21.06 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $12.79 per bushel, barley's at $9.86, canola's at $20.18, and corn is at $11.94 per bushel. Live cattle were down $1.48 to $151.58. Feeder cattle January contract was down 55 cents to $177.73, and lean hogs were down 30 cents to $85.28. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to $73.90 US. Recapping one of our top stories, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith is heading back to the legislature. She's been absent from the ledge for 7 years. Danielle Smith won the by-election in Brooks Medicine Hat on Tuesday night, taking home around 54% of the vote. Smith says she'll be reconvening the legislature on November the 29th to discuss offering more help for Albertans who are struggling with high gas and electricity bills. Our legislative reporter Tyler Dawson will be joining us momentarily to discuss Premier Smith's big win in Brooks Medicine Hat on Tuesday night. And just a reminder, if you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. We'd love to hear from you.
Here's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar. Find unique gifts at the Indigenous Artisans Christmas Market on Saturday, November 19th at the Lethbridge Public Library's main branch from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Discover handcrafted items, jewelry, home decor, and so much more. Plus, enter to win door prizes with every purchase. Admission is free. For more information, visit lethlib.ca. The Interfaith Food Bank is looking for volunteers to help in administration, their warehouse, and kitchen. The commitment is 3 to 4 hours, once or twice a week. Through your help, you'll be providing food security in our community and enjoy a sense of purpose by serving others. For details on volunteering, contact Bill at volunteer@interfaithfoodbank.ca or by calling 403-320-8779. And that's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar.
Alberta Premier Danielle Smith won her seat by winning the by-election in Brooks Medicine Hat on Tuesday night. She got around 54% of the vote. Now, to talk about this in more detail is our legislative reporter and the Alberta correspondent with the National Post, Tyler Dawson, who joins us once again from Edmonton. Tyler, Smith won quite handily. Who was her nearest competitor?
Her nearest competitor was Gwendolyn Dirk with the NDP, followed by Barry Morishita with the Alberta Party leader, actually. And then there were two independence candidates, I should say, who sort of rounded out the group. And as you say, a fairly substantial victory, 54% of the vote. And I think Dirk came in around 26 and Morishita around 16% of the vote. People are sort of already in the moments after this reading a lot into this, I think, saying that, oh, this wasn't a super commanding victory for Smith. 40-odd% of the voters in that riding didn't vote for her. And I'm not sure that sort of analysis is the right one. She won, and that's really what matters for her purposes. But I think it does show, not to overstate it at all, that things are looking pretty competitive in Alberta right now. That's a pretty good showing for the Alberta Party, which doesn't have a seat in the legislature, has not made very much of a splash for the last couple of years. And the NDP reasonably competitive as well in a riding that should have been a pretty straightforward United Conservative victory. So a really interesting by-election, but of course the relevant bit of news is that Danielle Smith will be taking her seat in the legislature when it returns on, I believe it's November 29th.
Now, it appears as though voter turnout was quite low, too. Was it around 30%? Why do you think that was?
Yeah, I mean, that's not unusual, I don't think, for by-elections. It's frankly, voter turnout's a problem across all elections at all levels of government. So I think that was probably a large part of it. Who knows? Maybe people were sitting at home watching the U.S. midterm election stuff instead of voting in a by-election. But, I think there's a couple other things happening there. The sense that Smith was almost certainly going to win probably kept some United Conservative voters at home. I think probably some not all that much love for the New Democrats in small town in rural Alberta. Not that Medicine Hat's a super small town these days, but I think that probably kept some people at home. But I think at the end of the day, this is actually just part of a pretty broad trend of people not really showing up all that in all that great of numbers for by-elections.
What do you think this will really mean for the people of Brooks Medicine Hat now that they've got the premiers, their MLA here, which is pretty cool? Are they going to see maybe some more capital projects thrown their way, especially as we lead up to next May's provincial election?
Well, there certainly has been some talk recently about sort of flinging money around the province, frankly, with the surplus. Obviously an election year, and we're going to see a lot of that spending. And I would expect that to be spread out. A lot of it is probably going to go to Calgary because that's a major battleground. The same with sort of the donut of suburban areas around Edmonton. But I see no reason why that money wouldn't also flow to other parts of the province. It will be interesting, of course, having a leader and the premier as your representative is a bit of a catch-22 because, of course, they have concerns sort of well beyond what constituents are talking about. So in that sense, might not be the most perfect situation in the world for people in Brooks Medicine Hat. On the other hand, they theoretically have a direct line to the most powerful politician in the province. So a bit of both happening there, I think, and it'll be interesting to see how much time Smith chooses to spend there in the weeks ahead because, of course, she doesn't live in the riding, but now has to represent them. So it'll be interesting to see. That's something I'm going to watch because I'm always fascinated about where politicians choose to run for their seats.
Now, some interesting polling suggests that the UCP may have its work cut out for it leading up to next May's provincial election, Tyler. The numbers show that the NDP is actually leading in Alberta right now in different ridings.
That's right, yeah. So the NDP is at 47% compared to 38% for the UCP. So this is pretty recent polling that asked, if the election was held today in sort of mid-October or late October when the polling was done, who would you vote for? And 47% saying the New Democrats. And that lead holds across the province, more or less. In Edmonton, it's 57% for the NDP to 31% for the United Conservatives. And in Calgary, it's 46% for the NDP versus 40% for the United Conservatives. The place where it doesn't hold true is in the sort of other category, rural and small town Alberta, where the UCP is up 44 to 36. But the thing to note here is that these numbers have shifted, pretty dramatically since 2019. The UCP was at 55% across the province in 2019 compared to the NDP at 33%. And in rural and small town Alberta, the UCP was at 67% and the NDP at 31%. So this does, I think, suggest that there is some movement in what people are thinking about where they're considering casting their ballots in the next election. And the sort of received wisdom in political circles is that there are three constituencies in Alberta. There's Edmonton, there's Calgary, and there's the rest. And in order to form government, you need to win two of those. And at present, the New Democrats are up in two of those. So for the United Conservatives looking at that, they need to be asking themselves, what can they do to not widen that gap necessarily in rural and small town Alberta, but narrow that gap in Calgary and Edmonton. So those are some of the questions that I'm certain the people around Smith are spending a lot of time thinking about right now.
Now, do you think some of the polling has to do with the Kenney effect? I mean, Kenney on his way out. Now we have a new premier, and she hasn't really had a chance to get her feet wet yet and really bring forth a lot of her policies and her vision as we lead up to the next election?
Yeah, I think it's probably a little bit of that. And I think it's also probably a bit of a hangover from the campaign. I think I said a few weeks ago that when I was reporting on the campaign, people said one of the reasons that Danielle Smith did so well was because she was running to be the leader of a Conservative party, not necessarily the leader of a province. And the things that she talked about were things that really resonated with the United Conservative Party membership. That was talking about COVID-19 policies, that was talking about the Alberta Sovereignty Act and fighting with Ottawa. Whereas some of the research on what Albertans wanted to talk about were kind of some different things like inflation and affordability, the future of the oil and gas sector and the economy, that sort of stuff. So the point I'm slowly getting around to making is there's a lot of ground, a lot of areas where Danielle Smith can come up with policy, make announcements, talk about these things, shift some of the conversation perhaps away from these more controversial things, talk about some of the bread and butter issues that Albertans want to hear about. And I have no doubt that that's what certainly some of her advisors are telling her right now. And so you're totally right. There hasn't been many policy announcements. So I think we're looking still a little bit at a hangover from the leadership race, and to some extent, Danielle Smith's government is an unknown quantity to Albertans and reporters, frankly, at this moment, whereas Rachel Notley is really, really well known. She's been around for a while. Everyone knows what she stands for. So certainly I think, it's very, very early days. I don't think we need to read, too much into some of these polling numbers.
Tyler, a former NDP MLA has pleaded guilty to a charge of breaching the Health Information Act when he allegedly used a computer to force his way into the vaccine records program. Can you explain a little bit more?
Sure. So Thomas Dang was an Edmonton New Democrat, and when the vaccine portal was first announced, where you could get your little certificate and vaccine information, he sort of ran a computer program that used Jason Kenney's date of birth and the date of his vaccination to sort of force entry to this records portal. And it basically exposed a security flaw in the portal. And so, some have argued that this was sort of a white knight hacking operation. But either way, he was charged. He has pleaded guilty to a Health Information Act charge. It's not a criminal charge. And so the defense and the Crown are in discussions, I guess, about what the penalty is going to be. The Crown, I think, is asking for a $10,000 fine, and the defense is asking for a $4,000 fine. But either way, a bit of a sideshow drama here that, and it's notable, the United Conservatives are still trying to make this an issue for Rachel Notley, demanding she say, what she knew and when and that sort of thing. So it'll be interesting to see if this story sort of lingers around at all in political circles.
It appears for the time being that protections against coal mining remain in place here in the province. Now that's according to our province's new energy minister, Peter Guthrie.
Yeah, so this was announced at, I believe, a hydrogen announcement this week. Of course, this was a big drama a little while back when the 1976 moratorium on coal mining and exploration on the eastern slopes of the Rockies was abolished, I guess, and led to quite a significant backlash, particularly from small town Alberta, sort of down your way, as people were concerned about the ways that coal mining might affect water systems and things like that. So under Jason Kenney, the government backtracked. Sonia Savage, then the energy minister, sort of issued an order that reestablished protections, and then there was going to be further sort of study on the issue. Now, in some comments recently, Danielle Smith had mused about sort of reopening the discussion about potential coal exploration. And this, of course, raised a few eyebrows among people who are concerned about this. But Peter Guthrie, as you say, confirmed that this order remains in place. So for the time being, the coal policy is unchanged. Could it change? I think that's possible. Public consultations likely would be a part of that sort of thing. But a little bit of a development on a file that is very much of interest in parts of the province for sure.
Now, Tyler, let's make our way to Ottawa for just a moment here. And Alberta's up for discussion at the Commission looking into the Liberal government's use of the Emergencies Act last February during the Freedom Convoy. In particular, they'll be discussing what transpired at the Coots border crossing not far from here in Lethbridge. And Coots Mayor Jim Willett will be taking the stand.
And, the most interesting thing that's come out so far is that he was text messaging Rajan Sawhney, who was then the transportation minister, I think, basically saying that, I think that the premier's ignoring what he called domestic terrorists. So, that was sort of a series of text messages that were tabled to the commission, which is looking into, basically three things: Ottawa, the Ambassador Bridge, and the Coots border crossing. So I think we're probably going to get a little bit of a look behind the curtain in the days ahead on what the government knew, what people were talking about and thinking regarding the Coots border protests. So, not wildly explosive news sort of at this hour, shall we say, but something to keep an eye on because, of course, there is very much an Alberta angle on all of that. And, court cases happening down in Lethbridge on that, 4 of them pretty serious criminal charges. So it'll be interesting to see what information comes out there as the commission continues its work.
The Alberta government, along with the federal government, are putting up hundreds of millions of dollars towards one of the world's largest hydrogen facilities that'll be in operation in 2024 in Northeast Edmonton. Tyler, is this a sign of an energy transition, perhaps?
I think it's a sign that there is some agreement, believe it or not, between the Alberta government and the federal government that we need to be looking at diversified revenue sources and diversified energy sources. And one of those prospects for Canada at this point is hydrogen. And so there seems to be some agreement on that, and that Alberta is sort of poised to be a world leader on the hydrogen front. So they're big numbers. I've got them in front of me here. They are $300 million from the federal government for construction, and then upon completion, the Alberta government is going to issue $161 million in grant funding for the sort of operation of that plant, and it's going to create, I think, about 2,500 construction jobs and I think 30 permanent jobs once it's all said and done. So I think it's a way to look at, you can look at it in terms of energy, which is obviously important, but also, you know, they're not always flinging mud at each other. Sometimes they can stand in a room and get along.
Now, Premier Daniel Smith has been discussing the potential of building a pipeline to the port in Churchill, Manitoba, but the plan has been met with a little bit of skepticism.
I think that's fair to say. Yeah, it's a challenging construction environment for starters, as anyone who's watched the ongoing thing about the railroad sort of sinking into the bog on its way up to Churchill knows. So a bit of a complicated one there. And what Danielle Smith did a couple weeks ago was write to Premier Scott Moe and Manitoba Premier Heather Stevenson and say, hey, we should get together to discuss this. Now, Manitoba seems a little bit unenthusiastic about this, shall we say, basically arguing that there are other priorities in Manitoba right now, and that while it's understandable that Alberta wants another sort of point of export for its oil and gas products, that there's an energy crisis and the world might have some demand for Alberta oil, that this is just simply not the same sort of level of priority for Manitoba. Of course, such a project would not just be an Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba thing. There's federal regulatory stuff that would need to happen there. But it'll be interesting to see how that one pans out and whether or not that becomes a viable project in the years ahead, or if there'll be more enthusiasm from other jurisdictions' politicians.
He's our legislative reporter and the Alberta correspondent for the National Post, Tyler Dawson. Tyler, thanks so much for joining us today from Edmonton.
Always a pleasure, Hal.
Well, today we have a couple of interesting guests with a very touching story of redemption and hope to share. Michaela Munn is a former prison inmate who is now becoming an advocate for women in crisis. And Linda Zanacco is the founder of He Knows Your Name Ministries and the author of the book with the same title, He Knows Your Name. Michaela and Linda, ladies, welcome to Bridge City News. And you're both joining me from Indiana, right?
Right. That's correct. Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's start with you first, Michaela. So I understand that while you were a college student, you went through some challenges which led you to a jail sentence. So can you maybe briefly share your story with us?
Absolutely. So I was in college, I was a senior, and I got pregnant. After I got pregnant, I actually had a sexual assault that went undocumented. And I ended up giving birth to my son 9 months later. But during those 9 months, I got really depressed. I was isolated. I started getting angry and a little bit socially awkward for me, which was uncommon. But at that time, I didn't really notice. I was too busy masking my pain and what I felt with alcohol and experimenting with recreational drugs. But I wasn't getting into the hard stuff yet. And unfortunately, I lost my son in the process. And so that led me to the jail sentence in a jail cell.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. And then, Linda, you have an unusual type of ministry. Can you share a bit about that and how you ended up helping Michaela while she was in prison?
Sure. My ministry started in 2009 when there was a baby found abandoned here in Indianapolis, thrown away in a dumpster. And I called the coroner's office because the baby was deceased, and I had never in my life thought of anything like this before, but I knew that there was just such an injustice because they were calling the baby Doe, found in a dumpster wearing only a diaper. And I thought, no, as children of God, we have names and we need dignity in death. And so I made sure that that baby got a funeral after a 13-month criminal investigation. But that was years before Michaela's story hit the news. And it just became one of those situations where, as I grew this non-for-profit ministry that the Lord gave me, people started calling me. And Michaela's son's father called me and had asked for help with the baby's funeral.
Oh my gosh, that's unreal.
Yeah.
Okay, so Michaela, then what's going through your mind in hindsight? What was it that caused you to get to the point of allowing your baby to die?
At that point, I don't think I could give you an answer. It wasn't until actually COVID hit, when we were locked down in prison and we couldn't do anything. That's when I started realizing that I had issues that had nothing to related to my son. I was so depressed. I was so self-centered, and I wasn't focused on the right things. I lost myself is what it was. I got so far down a rabbit hole that I couldn't feel my way up. And I knew that I couldn't change what I did. I know what I did was wrong, and I deserved to be punished for what I done. I got that. But the punishment that I gave myself was far worse than the punishment that the judge handed to me.
Ugh.
And I just remember I didn't want to be there anymore. I didn't want to feel how I felt. So the only way I could go was up. So I started forgiving not only myself, but for the things that other people had done to me before that I hadn't fully worked through. And that took a lot of time, and it still does. I haven't fully forgiven myself, but I know that telling my story and sharing it with others gives other women the empowerment they need to get the help that they need. We never really talked about mental health, and it never really occurred to me that I needed it until this happened. And unfortunately, I can't bring my son back. But those things that you can Google that I did will show the result of a crisis hotline now. I mean, there's safe haven laws that I didn't even know about. There's other options out there, but how do you know? And at that point, I didn't know there was options, and I was too drunk to really consider anything. Depending on who you talk to, I would tell you the truth. And then if I was not sober, I was lying. So I was scared. I was isolated. I was confused. I didn't even trust anybody. My parents didn't know. My friends didn't really know. It's not anybody's fault but my own, because I was so caught up in what I was feeling and I didn't know how to deal with what I was feeling.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. Such a difficult thing to go through, and nobody really understands it unless they've been there. So, Michaela, you've had to deal obviously with a lot of guilt and a lot of shame, but what would you say to viewers maybe struggling with that?
That's normal. As anybody would say, like, you think everybody has this picture perfect Instagram or Facebook Live. That's just snippets of their life.
Right.
In reality, nobody really knows what's going on. Mm-hmm. But that's when people need to step in and check in, is what we like to talk about in prison. We would have people who would hold us accountable, who wanted us to be better and not bitter. And luckily for me, I reached out to Linda in the nick of time that I needed it. And I didn't have a relationship with Christ at this point. I was just starting to basically learn. And as I was learning and growing in the Word of God, Linda was helping me and guiding me along the way. And as she was doing that to me, I was doing that to people on the inside. And that's how you're going to be the change. You're going to start conversations that are uncomfortable, but that's to help other people behind me so they can be comfortable and they can learn from my mistakes. I don't want somebody to sit in a prison cell like I did. I want them to get the help that they need. I don't want them to have to make a choice or a decision like mine. That was the worst book in my life that I ever had to go through. And I want somebody to learn from my mistake, not be like me, but to be better than I was.
Oh, for sure. How did you find Linda?
So He Knows Your Name is on my son's tombstone. And I remember asking my friend at the time, I was like, what is this? And he told me about the organization. At this point, I never saw like the funeral or anything like that. I knew there was a service, but I wasn't ready. If I would have saw that, things would have turned out a lot different for me. And I said, I want to talk to her. And the first question was, are you absolutely sure that you're ready for this? And I said, yes. And we corresponded throughout the year. We had tons of emails back and forth. what I was struggling with, she was helping me as much as she could, offer me scriptures, doing a nurturing thing, which I wasn't used to. And it was nice. It was nice to feel welcomed and to feel loved. At that point, I've already gone through the ringer. I already called myself every name in the book that I could. And to have somebody accept me for who I was in spite of my mistakes made a difference for me. And I was like, I want to be like that. And I told her, I don't want another mom or another parent to sit where I am. So how can we team up and how can we make this different for somebody else?
Wow, that's amazing. Now, Linda, what can be done to help other young women in similar situations?
Well, I think Michaela really hit on it, and that is that, in 2016, when her son passed, just 45 days after he died, the first Safe Haven baby box went into northern Indiana. And it would have been within driving distance for her. And I think about her sitting on the internet like a lot of scared women do who have unwanted pregnancies or are in crisis and feel alone and isolated and all the things. They need help. And so now if Michaela would go online, she'd see a hotline number that's answered by a real person. And she would have been coached through, given resources, and supported through her decision. And that is absolutely everything. And so the work I do alongside the Safe Haven Baby Box is to do just that. It's to provide resources, and it's anonymous safe surrender for moms in crisis. And there's like 126 boxes now. There's been 21 safe surrenders of babies in those boxes who are healthy and adopted in 30 days. And they are now in many states. And I think by the end of the year, we're going to see 2 more states have boxes, and the legislation is passing in 5 more states. And I want to see this just continue to have momentum. And I think Michaela's story is key so that we can actually use a real woman's voice to speak to real women out there who need to know they have options when they're in crisis. And most importantly, they are not alone.
Oh, most definitely. Michaela, I see you wiping tears away. It obviously makes you still very emotional. Where are you at now? Have you been able to forgive yourself and live life with peace and hope?
I'm still working on forgiving myself. I think that's a process. I was able to finally see the funeral with Linda, and that was really hard for me. And then I was able to see his actual tombstone, which was extremely hard. But I have had so many people come forward and so many tell me that my story has helped them. And it's just a spark in a small conversation. And I mean, everybody needs help, and it's okay. It's basically nobody's got a perfect package. It's all right to ask for help, and especially if you need it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And Linda, obviously you're continuing to work with Michaela, and you've already said how powerful her voice is from woman to woman. And she's a strong voice for your organization called Safe Haven Baby Boxes.
Well, Safe Haven Baby Boxes was founded by Monica Kelsey, and He Knows Your Name is my ministry. And we've collaborated together because we're both really fighting to educate and raise awareness for the Safe Haven law. And the law here in Indiana then became a Safe Haven Baby Box law. And that's the legislation that is now newly being passed in different states. And that is an anonymous safe surrender, which is just really vital for women in crisis. And I would say, not so much working with Michaela, but, becoming friends with Michaela and realizing that she's a woman and she's a human and she's forgiven by God, and to watch her walk this road of her own suffering and turn her story into something redemptive that it is, and see her believe in herself, and to be just someone who walks alongside her, cheering her on, is a gift to me. And that's what women need. We need real relationships. We need to walk with people who really believe the word of God, and the grace of God is for all of us. And I do not judge Michaela. I officiated her baby's funeral. I was there when she wasn't. And so I have a story for her that I get to hold in my heart and give her, like the pictures from the funeral that I officiated. And I got to meet her parents back then, and then to step into the courtroom on April 21st, which was her birthday this year, and give testimony at a modification hearing for her on her behalf and say, I believe in her, and I believe her voice is so important in this generation. And to see that judge say, take those handcuffs off, she's going home, and they reduced her sentence, was one of the greatest joys of my life, that I could serve alongside her and love her as a sister in Christ.
Wow. You both have such powerful testimonies, and you're both such strong women, and then together you're just a force to be reckoned with. And I just think that so many women and families, men, whoever, can be blessed by both of you. Absolutely. And those are some really amazing organizations. So Safe Haven Baby Box and He Knows Your Name. So how can viewers help out with these ministries?
Well, I think going on the website, shbb.org, and just see what's going on there. We need boxes in many other cities, and we need it to spread. And they can do some fundraisers and just come alongside the mission and work with their police chief or their mayor in their own little town and get people on board to make sure that these boxes are put in where they need to be put in. And they are privately funded. So it is a community effort, which is really beautiful. And then He Knows Your Name is heknowsyourname.org. And I am always doing things. I'm having a funeral soon for 3 babies that have been unclaimed at a funeral home. And I continue to really bring dignity in death by making sure a child has a name in life, and celebrating life and honoring every single baby, no matter what, is really what I'm doing. And so I would say follow me on social media, subscribe to my newsletter that's through my website, because it's so current, and I love for people to know exactly what I'm doing month by month so that they can join in where they can, and also see needs then in their own cities, which I'm Washington State this Saturday is doing a dedication for something at a private hospital. And it's because this woman, a nurse, connected with me because she heard me on the radio. And now she is a champion for some big movement in Washington State. And that kind of thing just makes me so excited to say, from one like Esther here in Indianapolis to another one there, like, go move and make change in your community and in your generation with something spectacular.
Amazing. Like I said, 2 strong women. There you go. Lives will be changed. Thank you so much for sharing your stories with us, ladies.
Thank you, Jeanette.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Michaela Munn is a former inmate who is now an advocate for women in crisis. And Linda Zanacco is the author of the book, He Knows Your Name. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.